Fly, survive, lessons from piloting an airplane. Oh man, there's nothing like it. Not in a day like today. Says what you see out there is what we call 0-0. That means you can't see the ground. Wouldn't want to be piloting today, but boy, I love talking about piloting. My situation was I had an opportunity to learn how to fly. Friend of mine, boss, however you want to put it together, he said, "How would you like to learn to fly?" I said, "Well, sure." I never thought I'd see 50 because of childhood illnesses, genetics. So I took my chances. And I knew that my uncle had died at 54 in an airplane. I'm sorry, 34. And I was 34. So I said, this makes sense. I was always up for any adventure, trying something new. I've done a lot of things, but flying, oh man, it was so amazing. As a child, I spent a lot of time in a car, and I had constant car sickness. I was always getting car sickness. They often called it motion sickness. And I knew that Dramamine took it away. But later in life, I learned that if you were sitting up in the car and you could look down and you could see the road in front of you, you didn't get sick. It was from sitting in the back seat where you couldn't see the road, you get sick. Because the motions that's going on and you're not seeing anything is what caused it. So first day I went up in the airplane with of course, an instructor pilot. And piloting was part of my life. I mean, my uncle was a pilot. My dad had piloted when he was a young boy, and then he became a navigator. My dad was a flight engineer, and my uncle was a pilot. And so it was so much in my blood, and my uncle had died, and I thought, well, I'll just take over his tradition. So I did. So I became a pilot. But the first time I went up in the air, boy, I was sick. Man, I had motion sickness real bad. So the second day I come in for my lesson, and I said, I'd like to do nose down spins today. And the teacher said, what? So I want to do nose down spins. I think if we do that, I will get over feeling motion sickness. He said, okay. So we did 3 times. We did. When a plane has to have air below it and air above it to keep it up in the air. And when you do nose down spins, there's no way that happening in the way it normally does. So you have to pull up in order to recover. And so we did it 3 times. And I felt pretty bad when I finished the day, but I didn't feel like I did the day before. So I said, So sure enough, the next day I woke up and I was fine. I felt good. And I went to my lesson and I was good. And that was it. That was it. It was over. I was done with motion sickness. And I flew. I became a private pilot. I became a commercial pilot. I became a ground instructor. And I became an advanced ground instructor. My husband and I taught a right flight, WRIGHT. It's a program that you do within schools. Gosh, it was fun. We worked with junior high school aged kids. We just had a ball. We just absolutely had a ball. And you teach them all the ground stuff, okay? And then when they graduate, and I can't remember, it was either 9 or 12 weeks. When they graduate, then they go to the airport, and there's a bunch of private pilots who usually they take 3 or 4 kids in the plane, depending on what size plane they have. And they take them up and they give them an example of flying. And it's just, oh gosh, it's great. And then the parents come and we had hot dogs and Coca-Cola and everything. But now let's talk about my flying experiences. Now, well, let's first talk about what I'd like to do with this channel. If I get comments on this channel where people would like more information, I would be glad to do a podcast, but not just the two of us on regular YouTube video, of my husband's adventures, because he has almost circled the globe. My father did circle the globe for the International Geophysical Year. I believe it was 1984. But my husband is just the tiniest little piece he has, in that he's got a map in our living room with all of his different flights. He was in Vietnam, and he did a lot of other things in the Air Force. So even my dad and my uncle were all in the Air Force. He's got some really funny stories. But I just can't begin to tell you what it does for your self-esteem to fly an airplane. You get in the airplane, and part of what they try to teach you, and it happens. It's not crap. It happens. You're supposed to stretch your mind so that you can feel the wingtips. So you know where the wingtips are. It's sort of like knowing where your car is when you're pulling in to park somewhere, but except it's just wingtips. And then, of course, your prop is in front of you. You can see that usually, depending on what you're flying. But in a small plane, you can. And behind you is the rudder. The ailerons are the edges of the plane that can go up and down. And the rudder goes back and forth like this. Rudder likes this. And oh gosh, it can be so much fun to use rudder, because you can push that rudder down and turn yourself a little bit sideways, not nose down, just a little sideways, and pew! Oh gosh, I love to do that. Anyway, I had the opportunity for Lady Pilots Convention in Alaska, Anchorage, Alaska. And I thought, oh man, I was going to get to meet Sally Ride. And this was in 1984. It was the World's Fair was in Louisiana. Yeah, was in Louisiana that year. And we could stop there too. And anyway, I found two gals who wanted to go with me. So it was 68 hours of flying, and it was just fantastic. I left out of Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. I left out of Jacksonville, Florida, flew along the bottom of the United States, and then up California into Alaska, and then I came back the other way. So it was just got to circle the United States. Through Canada. Oh gosh, it was great fun. We went to the World's Fair, and we stopped in some places in California where it was hot, and got to see Sally Ride, and we were the furthest who'd come in our own plane. Other people had come flying, like from overseas and what have you, but not in their own plane. So that was fun. The way back, though, we almost didn't make it, because I was cleared down below 2,500 feet below the mountaintops before the air traffic controller realized that he had the wrong plane and pulled me up. But those things happen. That's why it's just like, I started riding a horse pretty early in life, and I did a lot of crazy things with horses, and I made it, and I taught equine therapy, but nothing's like flying. Gosh, I have to tell you that getting up there and, I flew, the man who said, would you like to learn to fly? I worked for him. I worked for him for a 3 years, flying all over, mostly in Canada. He was a pulp wire salesman, and we flew into tiny little places. We flew into the grass strips. We flew into dirt strip. We had 2 bicycles in the back, and then we'd bike our way to the different pulp mills. They were pulp mills. They take the trees and they make pulp, and then they transfer that to the paper mills where they make paper, or gauze for hospitals or whatever. But they go from pulp to paper or pulp to something else. And he just sold the wire that they used. And of course, it was massive amounts of wire. But he just needed a little hop plane to hop around all over Canada. It was great fun. I got to see Ontario, and oh gosh, Quebec. Oh. I'm a real rustic gal. I love the farm, the farm I rent here. And the idea of getting to see Quebec City was just so special. It reminded me, I lived for a number of years in Guanajuato, and it's a lot like Quebec City. Anyway, the point is, when you have a small plane, you can go about anywhere. Anyway, one time when I was flying up to Quebec City, I had to go to a place where I couldn't get any gas. I couldn't make the trip without stopping to get some illegal gas. In other words, they would move gas to where a plane really couldn't get it, and then you'd have to buy it, and it'd be 3 times the price of if you paid it at a pump. But I did have to do that because I just didn't have enough gas to make the trip. But it was so incredible when I came into Quebec City. Up here, I'm telling my stories. But that's what it's about. You know, I come into Quebec City, and this man is speaking French, of course. But the national language in the airplane is English, so I wasn't too worried. I knew eventually he'd speak English. And he did. He came back, and he said, "Is this your first trip here?" I said, yes, sir. Well, wait, I'll be back. And he went away, and I just kept on flying towards Quebec City. And he came back and he said, "On your right." And he would tell me what was down there on the ground in Quebec City, because I was down kind of low. I was going to be landing before long. And he'd say, "On your left." And all the way down. It was just this incredible French gentleman. And I realized that's why women fall for Frenchmen. I mean, they're so incredibly smooth. That was such fun. But in general, gosh, there's nothing like flying. I got to tell you, it's just, from then on in the classroom, every time I was teaching a class, I would say to people, the students, well, especially because mostly at that time I had either junior high or senior, kids in their last 3 years of high school. If you ever get a chance, learn how to fly. There is something so incredibly amazing about going up in the air, having the knowledge. Now, you have to have the knowledge. You got to study ground school. You got to know why the plane stays up there, how it stays up there, how it comes down from up there, all that. Oh, wow, it's something. I had a flight into one of the Carolinas one afternoon, and it was like this, only in a cloud. There was a cloud. And when I was cleared to land, there was no cloud. Well, I wasn't an IFR, that's instrument rated. I wasn't instrument rated at the time. And I came down and flew right into that cloud. It had moved over the top of the landing strip in the time between I was cleared and the time that I actually was allowed to land. And I made it because I knew what to expect. But you're not supposed to do that, and I got called in on that, but I was okay, I was cleared. But I did fly a retractable, and that's a mistake, because if you fly a retractable, there's 2 kinds of pilots, they say. There's them that does and them that lie about it. In other words, there are those who have landed belly up with the wings, the wheels up, and those who lie about it. I'm not lying about it. I landed with the wings, it was hard, with the wheels up. It was one of those weird situations where I was so incredibly distracted by everything else that was going on, and I had almost landed, and they told me to cut away because there was a big plane coming, so I cut away. And it was October, and the sun was real low in the ground. I could hardly see what was going on since I'd cut away. And then when I came back in to land, I had not done gump, which is gear, undercarriage, metaphor with prop. And that's what you do. You say this little rhyme. lay pilots do. You know, the big guys don't do this. But anyway, I had gotten to undercarriage and gotten moved and didn't do anyway. I landed. But I only slid about 8 feet. I only bent the prop. Didn't hurt the bottom of the airplane at all. Both of us were fine. But I learned a hard lesson. I learned a very hard lesson. Same way with going through the cloud. I learned a hard lesson. Every single thing I did with that plane, I learned a hard lesson. One time we were at Cedar Key, and the runway was short, Cedar Key, Florida. And at the end of the runway was the water. You know, if you missed, you went into the water. And I did it. I remember trying to take off in Maryland. No, it wasn't Maryland. It was further north than that. Anyway, it was mountains completely surrounded this tiny little airport. It might have been in Canada. It all becomes a blur after a while. But anyway, I wanted to take off, and one of the things you have to have is air under the wings. That's how it works. You have to have the air has to go up. You get lift, and it takes the plane up, and that's how it works. That's the principles behind. That's what you take ground school for, is to understand how the plane goes up. Well, it was thin air. It was high, and it was summertime. Well, thick air is this cold air. Thin air is summertime air. Up in high altitudes, air is thin anyway, and so there you are. And so I took off, and nothing happened. I just circled and circled, circled and circled, and just kept until finally it got high enough. And one time I was flying along, and there was something in the atmosphere that the lift was gone, and I suddenly fell 500 feet. Just that fast. And everything in the plane, all my pencils and everything, and notebooks, everything went up into the ceiling. And that's an incredible experience. But in general, when nothing happens, when you don't have any emergency, oh God, it's the most amazing feeling to just, all you have is the sound of the prop. And you have to learn all these things. You know, that's why you take ground school. You have to learn, there's something called an NDB, and it points to wherever there's an NDB transmitter in the ground. It just points. But then there's something called the VOR, and everybody tells you one day it will make sense. It's the damnedest thing you ever saw. I studied that thing. I read everything I could read. I studied it, read. One day I went, oh, and it worked. Now that's part of what happens. You have to learn, I flew into some really bad storms, and you don't mean to. Yeah, of course, you just don't mean to. It just happens. You have to deal with it. Sometimes you have to pee. You have to deal with that. I never hear anybody talk about that. But you do. You have to. That's part of the problem. There's so many things where you can't come down. It's so amazing, and I saw so many different places. Like when you land on grass or you land on the dirt, you stop. It doesn't roll. Just but the fun thing is to go into some of these little tiny airports where they have a little restaurant that's close to the airport, so that folks like me now that too old to fly can go over and have lunch and watch planes come and go. Oh man! Of course, now it's a lot easier because all you got to do is just go on the computer and say images of planes landing, and it comes out, comes back. I always wanted to be flying Doctors Without Borders or something like that, so I could really feel like I was doing something that was really making a genuine difference. That would have been so great. just so great. I mean, the confidence, and that's why I think every person who could possibly have the ability to take a few flight lessons should do so, because the level of confidence that comes from holding that machine, holding that yoke, and dealing with whatever's going on, especially because, you know, I was flying from the United States up into Canada, and of course the weather's, we had ice on the wings and all kinds of issues to deal with. And I did it. I did it for years. I did it. And I taught flying too. And that's an experience that you don't ever want to teach. I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. You don't ever want to teach a doctor or a lawyer, because both a doctor and a lawyer have been taught by other people that they are about as close to God as you get. You know, they've done it. They've passed the bars. They've done the surgery. Whatever it is, they've done it. And nothing else can be that hard. I mean, it just can't be that hard. And it's true that so many people who die in small planes are either doctors or lawyers who've not had enough humility. Because now I'm telling you self-confidence, right? I told you that very clearly. But you also get humility. Oh gosh, you get a level of humility you cannot believe, because I mean, it's just metal. I mean, I've flown a Piper Cub, which is a little thing with a little there's a little piece of wire on the hood that could bounce us up and down. That's what is your gas gauge. It's so funny. It's really funny. I've flown Sterling. Aerobatic plane. I took aerobatic lessons and learned how to do a chandelle, which is where you're flying along and you go upside down and back around just like you're a Ferris wheel. Oh gosh, the feeling is it's just amazing. It's just so amazing. And I got to tell you that every time I see the birds, you know, the military birds who fly formation. Oh man, it makes my heart almost stop. It's so beautiful to see them. My husband tells me they're only about a meter apart, and boy, from down here it looks like they're right on top of each other, but it's just so beautiful. There's something so incredibly mesmerizing about being in the air, just hearing the hum of that engine. You know, Grandpa used to talk about the train because he was a carpenter on the railroad, Northern Pacific Railroad, and he liked the choo, 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 choo. Well, I love horses, and the horses go like the beat of your heart. And that's the way I always felt about horses. It was like your heart was beating. And the feeling between your thighs of holding on to that animal and feeling that animal muscles move and just be able to push him one way or the other with your thighs, and a trained horse, and it would turn one way or the other. It was an amazing feeling, but there is something like an airplane is like, if you've ever seen a drone going over and they're showing pictures of what the drone picks up, you can't imagine what it's like when you're flying your own plane and you're seeing the same kind of thing. Oh, it's just a totally amazing feeling, especially when you've started out with that fear and it's been completely put aside. Not that you aren't aware that every single second you're not paying attention could be your last, that you do. But after you've done it for a while, you just know it's your job, and you just do it. You don't lose your humility, but you sure gain self-confidence. It's a beautiful thing. So lessons from piloting an airplane. Stay tuned. I'm going to try to get the husband to come on and talk to you some of his stories. Oh, his stories are fascinating. The different interactions with different places and different people with different cultures. Just an incredible story. And of course, there's also the scary ones like I told you about. But you just never know what you're going to find at the other end. Thanks for listening. If you got any questions down below, just ask me. I'll be happy to answer them. Be happy to, whatever you think. Oh, by the way, I'm wearing this because I'm a deep ecologist and I'm into taking care of the earth. And flying planes isn't exactly taking care of the earth, but it was an opportunity that I did take, and I'm not sorry. And I love telling you about it. Thank you.